The void screamed warnings across 1,000 light-years. Admiral Corvin Thrace stood before the massive viewport of the UES Decimator, watching distant stars bend and twist as space itself recoiled from his ship's approach. The flagship of humanity's first extinction fleet wasn't just moving through space, it was devouring it, leaving reality scarred in its wake. "Sir," came the voice of his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Naya Voss, her tone carefully controlled despite the magnitude of what lay ahead. "We're detecting massive fleet movements in the hegemony core systems. Approximately 4 million vessels converging on the Nexus fortifications." Thrace didn't turn from the viewport. 4 million ships. The largest armada in galactic history, assembled by the 17 races of the Terran Eradication Coalition, all focused on a single objective: ensuring humanity never again threatened the established order of the galaxy. "How long since they declared us extinct?" he asked quietly. 73 years, sir. Since the massacre of Kepler Prime." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kepler Prime, humanity's first and most promising colony world. 3 billion souls vaporized in coordinated orbital bombardment, while children played in parks and couples shared their first kisses. The Coalition had broadcast the slaughter across every inhabited system, a warning of what happened to species that dared to expand too quickly, to innovate too boldly, to refuse their place in the cosmic hierarchy. They had declared humanity extinct afterward, forbidding any mention of the word human in galactic discourse. Earth became a forbidden zone, its location classified beyond even the highest security clearances. The Coalition congratulated itself on solving the human problem before it could spread. They were wrong. "Status of the Omega Protocol?" Thrace asked. "All systems nominal, sir. The Decimator is performing beyond projected parameters. We're not just faster than light. We're faster than causality itself. By the time their sensors detect our approach, we'll already be among them." Thrace finally turned, his weathered face betraying nothing of the storm raging within. Behind him, through the viewport, space continued to warp and writhe as the Decimator carved its impossible path through dimensions that had no names. The ship was more than a vessel. It was humanity's answer to annihilation, forged in the depths of Earth's crust during 7 decades of hidden preparation. While the galaxy celebrated humanity's extinction, the survivors had not wept. They had not mourned. They had worked. "Signal the fleet," he commanded, his voice carrying across the bridge like judgment itself. "All ships report readiness for deployment." The response came through quantum entanglement, bypassing the normal limitations of communication across space. One by one, the voices of humanity's finest reported in: "Retribution standing by. Vengeance ready for deployment. Reckoning awaits your command. 100 vessels, each one carrying technologies that defied the known laws of physics. Each one crewed by humans who had been born into extinction and raised on the promise of return." "Admiral," Voss said, her voice tight with anticipation, "we're approaching the outer detection grid. Coalition forces are beginning to mobilize, but their formation suggests they still believe they're facing a conventional threat." Thrace allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "They've forgotten the most important rule of war," he said. "Never assume your enemy is dead until you've scattered their atoms across the cosmos and watched the stars burn out." He turned to his command crew, each face reflecting the same terrible resolve. "And even then, keep watching." The Decimator surged forward, reality bending like heated metal around its hull. In the distance, 4 million enemy ships prepared for what they believed would be humanity's final defeat. They were about to learn why extinction was never permanent for a species that refused to die. High Overlord Vexithaler of the Centaurian. Empire felt his 3 hearts skip in synchronized terror as the sensor readings cascaded across his command screens. The readings made no sense. ships appearing from directions that didn't exist, moving at velocities that violated fundamental constants, emitting energy signatures that his computers refused to classify. "Report!" he bellowed across the command deck of the Coalition flagship Eternal Dominion, his scaled hands trembling despite his efforts at control. "Sir, we're detecting massive spatial distortions across 17 sectors," his chief science officer replied, her usually steady voice cracking. "Whatever's approaching, it's not following normal physics. Our predictive algorithms are failing. Completely." Through the panoramic viewing deck, Vexthaler could see the greatest military assembly in galactic history. The hegemony core systems bristled with defensive installations that had never known defeat. Fortress worlds, each protected by planetary shields capable of withstanding stellar collapse. Battle stations the size of moons, armed with weapons that could crack planets. And surrounding it all, 4 million warships representing the combined might of 17 advanced civilizations. It should have been impregnable. It was designed to stop armies, to end wars before they began. "Sir," came an urgent transmission from the outer perimeter. "We're receiving a broadcast on all frequencies. Origin unknown, but the quantum signature is—" A pause filled, with the weight of impossible recognition. "Sir, it's human." The bridge fell silent. Every being present had been raised on the certainty of human extinction. The word itself was barely remembered, relegated to historical footnotes about a primitive species that had grown too ambitious for its own good. "Impossible," Vexthaler whispered. "They were eliminated 73 years ago. We watched their worlds burn. Shall I play the transmission, sir?" Vexthaler's primary heart hammered against his chest cavity. "Do it." The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, conversational even. Admiral Thrace's words carried across the void with the inevitability of physics itself. "Attention, Coalition forces. This is Admiral Corvin Thrace of the United Earth Navy. 73 years ago, you declared war on humanity by murdering 3 billion innocents at Kepler Prime. You broadcast our children's final screams across the galaxy as entertainment. You declared us extinct and forbade even the mention of our name." Pause. In that silence, 4 million ships held their collective breath. Today we return the favor. The first human vessel materialized inside the Coalition's outer defensive perimeter, simply appearing where nothing had been before. The UES Retribution was sleek and predatory, its hull seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Before the Coalition's sensors could fully lock onto it, the ship opened fire. What emerged from its weapons wasn't energy or matter. It was concentrated negation. Wherever the beams struck, Coalition vessels didn't explode or burn. They simply ceased to exist, as if reality itself had been edited to remove them from existence. "Fleet movements detected," his tactical officer screamed. Multiple signatures appearing throughout the formation. One by one, human warships materialized within the Coalition fleet like ghosts stepping into the light. Each appearance was preceded by gravitational anomalies that seemed to tear holes in space-time itself. The humans weren't just using advanced technology. They were weaponizing the fundamental forces of the universe. The UES Vengeance appeared directly above the fortress world of Kronos 7, its guns trained on the planetary shield generators. When it fired, the shields didn't overload or collapse. They turned inside out, becoming weapons that began systematically destroying the world they were meant to protect. "How?" Vexthaler demanded, watching his supposedly impregnable defenses crumble like sandcastles. "How are they doing this?" His science officer's response came through chattering mandibles. "Sir, they're not following any known principles of combat. Their weapons appear to be altering fundamental constants within localized space-time. They're not just attacking our ships. They're attacking the physics that allow our ships to exist." The Coalition fleet, despite its overwhelming numbers, found itself fighting an enemy that refused to play by any recognizable rules. Human vessels, phased in and out of dimensions, struck from angles that geometry insisted were impossible, and employed weapons that seemed to reach backward through time to destroy targets before they could be fired upon. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel," Vexathaler ordered desperately. "Target the decimator." 4 million weapons turned toward Admiral Thrace's flagship. The combined firepower could have sterilized entire star systems, reduced gas giants to their constituent atoms. The beams struck the decimator and simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, stopped, as if the very concept of the attack had been rejected by reality itself. "Sir," his communications officer whispered, "we're receiving another transmission from the human admiral. My ancestors survived the ice ages." Thrace's voice carried across the void, calm and implacable. "They survived plagues that killed half their species. They survived world wars that set their own planet ablaze. And when you tried to kill them, they survived extinction itself." A pause that seemed to last eternities. "What makes you think they won't survive you?" Around them, coalition ships began to vanish not through destruction, but through something far worse, complete erasure from existence, as if they had never been built, never been dreamed of, never been possible. The hegemony's last stand was becoming its first and final encounter with what humanity had become in the darkness between the stars. Dr. Lydia Kane watched from the Decimator's science deck as coalition fleets tried desperately to understand their own annihilation. Her fingers danced across quantum crystalline interfaces, orchestrating technologies that 73 years of hidden development had made possible. "Probability cascade holding steady at 97%, she reported to Admiral Thrace. "The void engines are performing beyond theoretical limits. We're not just manipulating space-time. We're convincing it to rewrite its own rules." Behind her, banks of computers hummed with calculations that pushed the boundaries of mathematics itself. The humans hadn't just survived extinction, they had transcended it, turning their enforced isolation into an opportunity to explore technologies that conventional galactic civilization would have deemed impossible or heretical. The UES Reckoning demonstrated this perfectly as it engaged 3 coalition dreadnoughts simultaneously. Instead of maneuvering to avoid their fire, it simply existed in multiple probability states at once, allowing enemy weapons to pass through timelines where the ship wasn't present while returning fire from realities where it had perfect targeting solutions. "How long did it take us to crack quantum superposition?" Admiral Thrace asked, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. 47 years, Dr. Kane replied. "The breakthrough came when we stopped trying to observe quantum states and started learning to inhabit them. Coalition science is still limited by the assumption that reality has to be consistent. On the main screen, a coalition battle group was discovering the limitations of that assumption. The UES Annihilation had positioned itself at the center of their formation and activated what humanity called a causal inversion field. Suddenly, every shot the coalition ships fired struck their own vessels, traveling backward through cause and effect to ensure that the intended target became the inevitable victim. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Voss reported, "coalition forces are attempting to retreat to the inner defensive perimeter. They're abandoning the outer fortress worlds." "Let them run," Thrace replied quietly, "but make sure they understand that space itself has become their enemy." As coalition fleets fled deeper into their own territory, they found that their retreat routes were becoming increasingly unreliable. Human ships weren't just following them, they were arriving at destinations before the coalition vessels had even chosen to go there, setting up ambushes in futures that hadn't yet been decided. The UES inevitability exemplified this approach, appearing in the path of fleeing coalition squadrons with such perfect timing that enemy commanders began to suspect their own navigation computers were compromised. In truth, the human vessel was using what Dr. Kane's team called temporal anchoring, identifying probability nodes where enemy fleets would be forced to travel and simply waiting there across multiple timelines simultaneously. Admiral came an urgent transmission from the Coalition flagship, broadcast on all frequencies. This is High Overlord Vex Thaler. We request terms for surrender. The Decimator's bridge fell silent. After 73 years of preparation, after decades of children raised on stories of genocide and extinction, the moment they had all trained for had arrived with surprising swiftness. "Patch him through," Thrace said finally. Vex Thaler's image appeared on the main screen, his 3 eyes wide with terror that transcended species barriers. Behind him, his command deck was in chaos, officers scrambling to manage retreats that had become routes, coordinating defensive positions that had become death traps. "Admiral Thrace," the Overlord began, his translator struggling with the emotional undertones of his speech. "We acknowledge that our assessment of human extinction was premature. We are prepared to negotiate immediate cessation of hostilities and full reparations for the Kepler incident." Thrace studied the alien's face for a long moment, seeing in it the same mixture of arrogance and desperation that had characterized galactic politics for millennia. The strong preying on the weak, the established powers maintaining their dominance, through terror and overwhelming force. "High Overlord," he said finally, "do you remember what you broadcast 73 years ago, after you murdered our children?" Vex Thaler's scaled features tightened. "Admiral, that was a different time, different leadership. We can negotiate. You broadcast their final screams as a warning to other species. You used the death agonies of human children as entertainment and education. You declared us extinct and celebrated our annihilation as a service to galactic civilization. Around them, the battle continued to rage, though battle was perhaps the wrong word. Coalition forces were being systematically erased from existence, not through superior firepower, but through applications of physics that treated reality itself as a weapon to be wielded. I remember those broadcasts," Thrace continued. "We all do. Every human alive today was raised on the sound of our children's final moments. Do you know what that does to a species, Overlord? What it teaches them about the nature of survival? Admiral, please. It teaches them that mercy is a luxury that extinct species cannot afford," Thrace said quietly. "It teaches them that in a universe where children's screams become entertainment, only the absolutely ruthless can hope to protect those they love." The connection terminated. Dr. Kane looked up from her instruments. "Admiral, we're detecting massive power buildups across the human fleet. All vessels reporting ready for Phase 2 deployment." Thrace nodded grimly. "Signal all ships. Commence the Omega Protocol. Show them what humanity learned in the 73 years they thought we were dead. The war was about to become something far beyond the Coalition's darkest nightmares. The universe held its breath as humanity's true weapons came online. Across the human fleet, vessels that had seemed impossibly advanced revealed themselves to be merely the harbingers of something far more terrifying. The Decimator itself began to transform, its hull flowing like liquid metal as internal mechanisms that defied classification rearranged themselves into configurations that hurt to look at directly. "Omega Protocol initiated," Dr. Kane reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were unleashing. "Reality anchors deploying. Causal stabilizers online. We are now operating outside the normal flow of cause and effect." Admiral Thrace watched as the Coalition's remaining forces, still numbering in the millions despite their catastrophic losses, attempted to regroup around the innermost fortress worlds. They had no idea what was coming. "Sir," Lieutenant Commander Voss said, her face pale as she reviewed incoming data streams, "the quantum computers are reporting something impossible. We're detecting Coalition vessels that haven't been built yet. Ships from their future arriving in our present. Temporal reinforcements. Thrace nodded grimly. They're pulling reserves from their own timeline. Desperate, but predictable. He turned to Dr. Kane. Doctor, please remind our enemies why we spent 40 years studying the grandfather paradox. What happened next would have been impossible to explain to any civilization that still believed in linear time. The UES paradox simply wasn't. Then it was. But it had also always been exactly where it needed to be, creating a cascade of causality that reached both forward and backward. Through the timeline, coalition reinforcements from the future found themselves arriving at battles that had already been lost in pasts that had never happened, while their own past selves discovered that their victories had been retroactively erased by enemies who had learned to edit history itself. My God, whispered someone on the bridge. Thrace couldn't tell who. The sight before them defied human comprehension as much as it did coalition resistance. Human vessels weren't just fighting in 3 dimensions anymore. They existed across multiple probability matrices simultaneously, appearing as quantum ghosts that struck from angles perpendicular to reality itself. The UES Schrödinger demonstrated this perfectly by existing in a superposition of victory and defeat until the moment of observation, at which point the wave function collapsed invariably in humanity's favor. Admiral, came a panicked transmission. From a coalition commander, we're requesting immediate evacuation of civilian populations. Our fortress worlds are showing massive reality distortions. Space itself is becoming hostile to non-human life. It was true. As the Omega Protocol reached full deployment, the fundamental constants of physics in coalition space began to shift in ways that favored human physiology, while making alien biology increasingly impossible. Gravity wells inverted, electromagnetic, radiation shifted into spectrums that burned alien neural pathways, and time itself began to flow at rates that only human consciousness could process effectively. Sir, Dr. Kane called out, we're detecting coalition attempts to activate their own reality-altering technologies. They're trying to deploy what appears to be universe reset protocols. Thrace's expression didn't change. Can they succeed? Theoretically, yes. If they're willing to sacrifice everything, every star system, every world, every living being in this galaxy, they could reset local space-time to a point before human expansion began. It would be cosmic suicide, but it would also undo our existence. The implications hung in the air like a death sentence. The coalition had one final option: destroy everything, including themselves, rather than allow humanity to continue existing. Time frame? Thrace asked. 12 minutes until they reach critical activation threshold. Admiral, if they succeed, not only will we be erased, but Earth itself will never develop spaceflight. Humanity will be confined to a single world for eternity, always wondering why the stars seem so empty. Thrace closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of Earth, of the blue marble that had given birth to a species stubborn enough to survive its own extinction, creative enough to weaponize the impossible, and vengeful enough to pursue its enemies, across the boundaries of reality itself. When he opened them, his decision was made. Dr. Kane, initiate Protocol Absolute. All vessels, prepare for Omega-level reality restructuring. He turned to face his crew, seeing in their faces the same terrible resolve that had carried humanity through 73 years of impossible preparation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to do something that no species in galactic history has ever attempted. We are going to make our existence so fundamental to the structure of reality that the universe will refuse to function without us. Sir, Voss said quietly. The energy requirements alone could destabilize local space-time permanently. We could tear holes in reality that never heal. Then reality will have to adapt, Thrace replied, because humanity has had enough of being considered expendable. Across the human fleet, every vessel began to glow with energies that had no names in any language. They were about to teach the galaxy's most advanced civilizations what it truly meant to refuse extinction. The Coalition's universe reset weapons powered up, racing against humanity's reality-anchoring protocols in a contest that would determine not just the outcome of the war, but the fundamental nature of existence itself. In the space between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the quantum fluctuations that held atoms together, the fate of consciousness itself hung in the balance. The universe screamed. Reality itself convulsed as two incompatible versions of existence clashed at the fundamental level. Coalition universe reset protocols hammered against humanity's reality-anchoring systems, creating paradoxes that threatened to tear holes in the fabric of space-time itself. "Hull integrity at 40%, someone shouted over the chaos on the Decimator's bridge. "The ship is existing in 17 different probability states simultaneously." Admiral Thrace gripped his command chair as the vessel shuddered between dimensions. Through the viewport, he could see stars being born and dying in accelerated time loops, entire solar systems flickering in and out of existence as the two technologies warred for dominance over the nature of reality. "Dr. Kane," he called out. "Status report." "We're approaching the convergence point," she replied, her fingers flying over controls that were phasing between solid matter and pure energy. "Both systems are reaching critical mass. In approximately 90 seconds. Either we succeed in making humanity fundamental to universal structure, or the Coalition succeeds in resetting existence to a pre-human state. And if neither succeeds?" Dr. Kane's face was grim. "Then we all discover what lies beyond the boundaries of existence itself." Across the battlefield, though battlefield no longer adequately described the metaphysical storm surrounding them, human and coalition forces found themselves fighting a war that transcended normal concepts of victory and defeat. Ships existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously winning and losing battles until observation collapsed their wave functions. Weapons fired backward through time to prevent their own creation. Soldiers fought enemies who might or might not exist depending on the outcome of conflicts that hadn't happened yet. "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Voss reported, her voice strained, "we're receiving communications from versions of ourselves in alternate timelines. They're warning us about timeline convergence." The main screen flickered, showing brief glimpses of other realities. In one, Admiral Thrace saw himself as a broken old man, leading humanity's final survivors in a desperate exodus from a dying Earth. In another, he observed a version of the bridge where non-human officers worked, alongside humans in perfect cooperation. In a third, he glimpsed himself as something no longer quite human, transformed by technologies that made the current Omega Protocol seem primitive. "All timelines are converging on this moment," the alternate Thrace said, his image flickering between possibilities. 73 years of preparation across infinite realities, all focused on this single point in space-time. If we fail here, humanity fails everywhere. If we succeed, we become inevitable, Admiral Thrace finished, understanding flooding through him. Not just in this timeline, but in all possible timelines. The Coalition's universe reset protocols reached critical activation. Across their remaining fortress worlds, massive installations came online, preparing to unweave the fundamental forces that held local space-time together. Their plan was elegant in its desperation. If they couldn't defeat humanity in the current universe, they would simply create a new universe where humanity had never existed. 50 seconds to reality cascade, Dr. Kane announced. "Admiral, we need to make the final commitment. Once we anchor humanity into the base structure of existence, there's no going back. We will literally become a universal constant, like gravity or the speed of light." Thrace looked around his bridge, seeing faces that represented not just his crew, but humanity itself. They were the children of a species that had been declared extinct, raised in hidden facilities deep beneath Earth's surface, trained from birth for this single moment when they would either join the cosmic order or transcend it entirely. "Will it hurt?" asked a young ensign, barely out of his teens. "Probably," Thrace replied honestly. "But then, existence has never been painless for our species. The question is whether we choose to accept pain as the price of survival, or inflict it as the cost of defying extinction." He turned to Dr. Kane. "Doctor, please ensure our message is embedded in the quantum structure of whatever universe emerges from this. Whether we succeed or fail, let it be recorded that humanity chose to make its stand not for conquest, but for the right to exist without permission." "Yes, sir." "All ships," Thrace announced across the fleet. "This is Admiral Thrace, in 30 seconds. We will either transcend the limitations that have defined every species in galactic history, or we will cease to exist entirely. There will be no middle ground, no compromise, no negotiated surrender. We go forward as humanity, or we do not go forward at all." The response came back from 100 vessels, from 10,000 human voices raised in perfect unity. For Earth, for Kepler, for the children who never got to grow up. "Initiate final phase," Thrace commanded. Reality held its breath and then shattered. The universe ended, and then, impossibly, it began again. But this time, it began with humanity written into its fundamental code, woven into the basic architecture of existence itself. Stars couldn't shine without acknowledging human presence. Gravity couldn't function without accounting for human mass. Time couldn't flow without incorporating human consciousness into its calculations. The Coalition's Universe Reset Protocols completed their activation, attempting to unweave reality and rebuild it without the human contamination. But they discovered in the final microseconds before their own existence winked out that humanity had become so fundamental to universal structure that removing it would be like trying to remove mathematics from physics or causality from time. The universe chose humanity over void, consciousness over emptiness, defiant life over peaceful extinction. When reality stabilized, humanity remained. But they were no longer merely human. They had become something that existence itself could not function without. When the universe finished rebuilding itself, Admiral Thrace found himself standing in a place that hadn't existed moments before, a space between realities where the fundamental forces of existence came together like old friends sharing coffee. "Remarkable," said a voice that seemed to emanate from the structure of space-time itself. "In all my eons of observation, I have never seen a species successfully integrate itself into the base code of reality." Thrace turned to find himself facing something that defied description, a being of pure mathematical concept, existing as the anthropomorphic representation of cosmic forces themselves. Behind it, he could see other entities, the embodiment of entropy, the personification of gravity, the living representation of electromagnetic force. "You are the architects," he said, understanding flooding through consciousness that now operated on scales previously impossible. "The ones who designed the universe." "Designed is perhaps too strong a word," the entity replied. "We are the universe, in the same way that you have now become part of its fundamental structure. The difference is that we were always here, woven into existence from the moment of creation. You forced your way in." Through his expanded awareness, Thrace could perceive the Coalition's fate. Their universe reset protocols had indeed succeeded, but the universe they had created was one where humanity was such a basic component of reality that it couldn't be removed without everything else ceasing to function. Coalition worlds now existed in a cosmos where human consciousness was as fundamental as the weak nuclear force, where human emotions affected the rate of stellar formation, where human dreams influenced the behavior of quantum particles. "They wanted to erase us," Thrace said, watching Coalition species slowly coming to terms with their new reality. "Instead, They made us indispensable. Indeed, every breath they take now requires your species' existence to maintain cosmic stability. Every thought they think occurs within a framework of reality that treats human consciousness as a fundamental constant. They cannot harm you without harming existence itself. On what had once been the flagship Eternal Dominion, High Overlord, Vexthalar stared at readings that made no sense. His science officers reported that local space-time had been fundamentally altered, that the basic forces holding matter together now included something new, something they were forced to classify as the human constant. Sir, his science officer reported, mandibles clicking with confusion. We're detecting that approximately 12% of universal stability now depends on the continued existence of human consciousness. If their species were to be eliminated, it would trigger a cascade failure that would unravel reality itself. Vexthalar's 3 hearts sank as he realized the full scope of what had occurred. Humanity hadn't just survived the Coalition's final gambit. They had turned it into the ultimate victory. They were now literally too important to the structure of existence to be threatened by any conventional means. Admiral Thrace, he broadcast on all frequencies, his voice carrying a mixture of defeat and grudging admiration. We surrender, unconditionally. Back in the space between realities, Thrace found himself considering options that transcended normal concepts of victory and defeat. He could, with a thought, reorganize the fundamental forces of the universe to make human expansion effortless. He could rewrite the laws of physics to make human technology automatically superior to any potential rival. He could make humanity the dominant force in the galaxy through nothing more than cosmic decree. What will you do with such power? Asked the architect. Thrace thought of Earth, of the children who had died at Kepler Prime, of the 73 years his species had spent learning to survive extinction. He thought of the Coalition species who had tried to erase humanity from existence, and who now found themselves dependent on human survival for their own continued existence. I think, he said finally, that we will do what humans have always done when faced with impossible situations. We will adapt, survive, and try to build something better than what came before. He reached out with his newfound cosmic awareness, not to dominate or control, but to communicate directly with every conscious being in the galaxy. His message was simple, carried on frequencies that resonated through the quantum foam itself. The war is over. Humanity accepts your surrender, but we choose mercy over vengeance. The universe has been restructured so that all of our species are now interdependent. We must learn to coexist, not because it is noble or virtuous, but because existence itself now demands it. Across 1,000 worlds, Coalition species felt the truth of those words resonate through their bones, their scales, their crystalline matrices. The universe had become a place where cooperation wasn't just preferable. It was cosmically mandated. However, Thrace continued, his voice carrying the weight of 73 years of justified anger, let it be recorded in the quantum structure of reality itself that no species will ever again be declared extinct for the crime of existing. No children will have their final screams broadcast as entertainment. No race will be erased from the cosmos because others find their expansion inconvenient. He paused, allowing the full weight of humanity's new position to settle into the consciousness of every being capable of thought. We are no longer just another species competing for resources and territory. We are now a fundamental force of the universe itself. And like gravity, like electromagnetism, like the strong nuclear force, we are not subject to the whims of politics or prejudice. We simply are. The message ended, but its implications would echo through cosmic history for eons to come. 100 years after the Omega Protocol reshaped reality itself, Admiral Corvin Thrace, now something far more than human, but not yet ready to abandon the term, stood in the observatory of New Kepler Station. watching the galaxy remake itself in humanity's image. Below, on the restored world of Kepler Prime, children of 17 different species played together in parks where human children had once died. The playground equipment was designed to accommodate everything from the crystalline juveniles of the Vorthon Collective to the energy-based offspring of the plasma quartz. What had once been humanity's greatest tragedy had become the galaxy's most powerful symbol of transformation. "Admiral," came a familiar voice. Dr. Lydia Kane, now existing as a hybrid of consciousness and cosmic force, materialized beside him. "The Galactic Council is requesting your presence at the Unity Accord signing." "Still calling me Admiral after all these years?" Thrace asked, with something that might have been a smile. "Some habits transcend dimensional boundaries," she replied. "Besides, you earned the title the hard way." Through the station's quantum-enhanced viewports, they could observe the profound changes that had swept across galactic civilization. The Coalition species, initially terrified by their forced dependence on human existence, had gradually adapted to a reality where cooperation wasn't just preferable, but cosmically mandated. Trade flourished on scales previously impossible. Scientific collaboration had advanced physics beyond recognition. Art and culture blended in ways that created entirely new forms of beauty. "Any regrets?" Dr. Kane asked. Thrace considered the question carefully. In becoming fundamental to the universe's structure, humanity had gained unprecedented power, but they had also accepted unprecedented responsibility. Every major decision now affected cosmic stability. Every policy choice influenced the behavior of subatomic particles. Every human emotion created ripples in space-time that could affect star formation millions of light-years away. "Sometimes I wonder what we might have become if we'd chosen a different path," he admitted. "If we'd sought justice instead of survival, or forgiveness instead of integration into cosmic law. And then I remember the sound of those children, screaming at Kepler Prime, broadcast as entertainment across the galaxy, and I think we chose exactly what a species like ours would choose. We chose to make sure it could never happen again. Not just to us, but to anyone." Through their enhanced awareness, they could perceive the quantum threads that now bound every conscious being in the galaxy. The universe had become a vast web of interdependence, with humanity serving as one of the primary nodes. Harming any species now required cosmic authorization that simply could not be obtained. War hadn't become impossible, but it had become so energetically expensive that conflicts were invariably resolved through negotiation rather than violence. "The Centaurian delegation is particularly anxious about the signing," Dr. Kane reported. "They're still struggling with the concept that their former enemies are now essential to their continued existence." "They'll adapt," Thrace replied. "It's what conscious beings do. Besides, High Overlord Vexthalar has proven surprisingly effective as an advocate for interspecies cooperation." It was true. The former Coalition commander had become one of the galaxy's most eloquent voices for the new reality, arguing that humanity's integration into cosmic law represented not conquest, but evolution, the next step in the development of conscious civilization. "Admiral," came another voice. This one carried on gravitational waves rather than electromagnetic radiation. "This is Captain Morrison aboard the UES Eternal Vigil. We're detecting massive temporal distortions near the galactic core. Something is attempting to breach our reality anchors." Thrace's expression shifted, cosmic awareness expanding to examine the disturbance. What he found there made even his transcended consciousness recoil in surprise. Something was pushing against the boundaries of their carefully restructured universe, something from outside the normal flow of causality entirely. "Analysis?" he requested, though part of him already knew what they would find. "Sir, Captain," Morrison's voice carried undertones of awe and concern. "We're detecting evidence of other humanities. Versions of our species from timelines where the Omega Protocol failed, where Earth was destroyed, where we never achieved transcendence. They're trying to break through into our reality. Dr. Kane's form flickered as she processed this information. That's impossible. The reality anchors should prevent temporal incursion from parallel dimensions. Unless, Thrace said slowly, those other humanities develop technologies we never imagined. Technologies born from desperation rather than integration. Through the quantum foam, they could hear it now, voices calling across dimensional barriers. Thousands of Admiral Thraces from realities where humanity had lost, where the Coalition's universe reset had succeeded, where human children still screamed in broadcast entertainment across galaxies that had learned nothing from their extinction. Help. Us! The voices pleaded. We know you survived. We know you transcended. Please, show us how to save our own realities. The implications were staggering. Their victory, their integration into cosmic law, had created a beacon that stretched across the multiverse itself. Every failed timeline, every reality where humanity had been crushed or erased, was now reaching toward their universe like drowning swimmers grasping for rescue. How many? Thrace asked quietly. Dr. Kane's calculations took several seconds, an eternity for consciousness operating at cosmic scales. Millions of timelines, sir. Possibly billions, every possible reality where humanity faced extinction, and lost. And they're all trying to reach us. Yes, sir. Thrace closed his eyes, or performed the equivalent action for a being whose consciousness existed partially outside normal space-time. The weight of cosmic responsibility had just multiplied, exponentially. It wasn't enough to have saved humanity in their own timeline. The very act of transcendence had created an obligation to all the humanities that had failed, all the children who had died, all the versions of himself who had watched their species burn without finding a way to prevent it. Options? He asked. We could seal the dimensional barriers completely, Dr. Kane offered, prevent any further incursion and maintain stability in our own reality, leaving billions of humanities to face extinction alone. Yes, sir. Or, we could attempt a multiversal rescue operation, use our integration into cosmic law to reach across dimensional boundaries and extract the surviving humans from failing timelines. She paused. The energy requirements would be astronomical. We'd be risking our own cosmic stability to save versions of ourselves that might not even be compatible with our reality. Thrace opened his perception to its fullest extent, observing the vast web of cause and effect that now included humanity as a fundamental component. The universe they had created was stable, prosperous, and peaceful. The galaxy had learned to cooperate not through wisdom but through cosmic necessity. Children of all species played safely on worlds where genocide had once been entertainment. They had achieved everything they had fought for. They had earned their rest. But beyond the barriers of their reality, other versions of himself were facing the same impossible choices he had faced a century ago. Other versions of human children were screaming their last breaths, while alien audiences laughed. Other versions of Kepler Prime were burning while coalition forces congratulated themselves on preventing another human problem. Signal the Galactic Council, he said finally. Inform them that the Unity Accords will need to be expanded. We're about to have considerably more members. Sir? Dr. Kane. Humanity didn't survive extinction just to live comfortably in one timeline. We survived to ensure that extinction could never again be inflicted on any version of consciousness capable of love, hope, or the simple desire to see tomorrow's sunrise. He turned toward the dimensional distortions, where billions of failing humanities were calling out across the void. Prepare the multiverse for the largest rescue operation in the history of existence itself. Admiral, Dr. Kane said softly, this could destabilize everything we've built. We could lose our own reality in the attempt to save others. Then, we'll rebuild it, Thrace replied. We're humanity. Rebuilding from nothing is what we do best. As alarms began to sound across New Kepler Station, as the Galactic Council emergency protocols activated, as every conscious being in their universe felt the cosmic tremors of humanity, preparing to reach across dimensional barriers, Admiral Corvin Thrace stood at the observation deck and smiled. Somewhere in a failing timeline, a version of himself was watching coalition fleets approach Earth with the knowledge that his species was about to be erased from existence. In a few minutes, that version would receive a message that had taken 100 years and the restructuring of cosmic law to send. This is Admiral Thrace of the United Earth Navy. We survived. We transcended. We're coming to get you. The universe held its breath as humanity prepared to prove that some responsibilities transcend the boundaries of reality itself. In the distance, the first dimensional gateway began to open, and through it came the sound every human in every timeline had learned to recognize, the voice of their species refusing to accept extinction, no matter how many realities it spanned or how many versions of themselves it had to save. The war for human survival had ended. The campaign for multiversal liberation was about to begin.